Cheese! Boom, there we go. Hey guys, I'm Tom the Tech Chap, and this is the new OnePlus 10T, and this is my review video, and actually this has been one of the toughest reviews I've made for a while. Over the last couple of weeks, I've gone back and forth between being a bit frustrated, but then also being surprisingly impressed. It really has been a bit of a roller coaster, and I want to explain why, and actually part of that does include this, the OnePlus 10 Pro. Without this, this becomes much easier to recommend and much more straightforward, but with it, I'm not sure. Okay, let's back up. This is the 10T, and it's OnePlus's latest performance-focused flagship phone. And it's like the 10 Pro that came out earlier this year, but they've added the more powerful Snapdragon 8 Plus Gen 1 chip. We also get much beefier cooling, a 16GB of RAM option, up from 12, much faster 150-watt charging, the screen gets a little bit brighter, and we get Bluetooth 5.3, and to top it all off, not only is this the same price— You have to laugh. Okay, so I've had this phone, which I'm recording on, the 10T, for about 2 weeks now. And this whole time I was under the impression, I was told by OnePlus, it was going to cost £799, 800 quid, which is the same as the 10 Pro, which I had a bit of an issue with, as you'll see from the rest of the video, because given the downgrades and the compromises in a lot of ways, it was too expensive, it didn't make sense. Now, 2 hours before the embargo, before this video was due to go live, I was told in an email that actually it's $629, £170 cheaper than I was told throughout this entire review process, which is great for you if you're thinking about buying one, terrible for me who's just spent a whole bunch of time making this video, and it does change things actually, so I'll also add a little bit on at the end in the conclusion, but I think the rest of the video still stands, and just bear that in mind. This is now £629 for the 8 plus 128GB version, and 100 more for 16 plus 256, so a good deal cheaper than the 10 Pro, which it needs to be. So you're thinking to yourself, well, smashing, what a nice little upgrade. Why wouldn't I pick up one of these new 10T bad boys? Well, hold your horses, because unlike the T series, not that T series, of the past, which were always just sort of mid-year refreshes, pretty much across the board improvements, even if they were sometimes a bit minor, this time the T series is all about performance, and there are trade-offs. And the big one, at least on paper, is the camera, because while on the outside the 10T gets a similar looking triple camera setup, the main lens has been downgraded from an IMX789 sensor to a 766, which is the same as you get on the Nord 2T. They've replaced the telephoto lens with a 2 megapixel macro for some reason. They've halved the resolution of the selfie camera, plus they've also removed the Hasselblad branding, although I'm not losing a whole lot of sleep about that. Essentially, they've traded better performance for a worse camera. They've also dropped the resolution from Quad HD down to Full HD. There's a slightly smaller battery, although it turns out actually it doesn't make much difference. But more importantly, there's no more wireless charging, that's out the door. They've also dropped the LTPO panel. And also, while we've had a bit of a minor redesign, including some new colors, and also this now smoother camera bump that just melts into the glass body, which is nothing like the Oppo Find X5 Pro, what they have also done is make the phone a little bit thicker. They've moved the hole punch from the corner to the center, which I'm not a huge fan of. And they've also removed the alert slider. Is this even a OnePlus phone anymore? So you could argue this is more of a side grade than an upgrade, which we might have expected with the T series. And in an ideal world, we'd have been looking at a 10T Pro. All the features of the 10 Pro, and then a few little extras to make it the T. But no, and so with the 10T, since performance is king, really this is being targeted at gamers, which is fine. A lot of people play games, and a lot of people want the best performance when they play their demanding games. But what doesn't make sense to me is why you'd buy this and not something like the ROG Phone 6 or the Red Magic 7S, and they get all the proper gaming extras, the stuff you want, like shoulder triggers and active cooling fan options, accessories, and proper full-fat game centers. Yes, this has a nice 720Hz touch sampling rate, but so does the 10 Pro. And we also have a Hyper Boost, Game Boost, whatever OnePlus call it. Again, the 10 Pro also has it. So it's just weird that this is the performance gaming phone from OnePlus, but we don't get any of those extras. Yes, we have a more powerful processor, and we'll come to performance in a second, and the cooling has definitely been stepped up, but that doesn't maketh the gaming phone, at least in my opinion. And since this is all about performance, let's talk about performance. And of course, the headline is that new Snapdragon 8 Plus Gen 1 chip, which is both faster and more efficient than the 8 Gen 1, and also gives us support for HDR gaming. We get variable rate shading for future games that might support it, and that's along with the bump up from 12 to 16 gigs of RAM on the higher spec model. So now you can have up to 35 apps paused at once. Although I'm not sure I even have 35 apps installed. But I reckon more importantly, we also get a much beefier vapor chamber cooling system. So the bottom line is, this is the fastest OnePlus phone ever, but not by much. In my tests, the 10T is about 5% faster in single core and just 1% faster in multi-core, although in the OpenCL test it is 7% quicker. But then switching over to 3D Mark, and the 10T is about 4.5% faster, but more importantly, in the 20-minute Wildlife Extreme stress test, the 10T is actually 15% faster. And that's all down to stability. So not only is the 10T a little bit faster, but this chip's efficiency paired with the improved vapor chamber cooling makes quite a big difference to throttling. However, using a nifty app called Gamebench, and I'll leave a link below if you want to check it out, the real-world improvements were less significant. I recorded the median FPS over a half-hour or so gaming session, and in Genshin Impact, with maxed out settings of course, the 10T averaged 55 FPS to the 10 Pro's 51. But then in Apex Mobile, there was nothing in it. They both averaged 59. Although on the plus side, the 10T did stay cooler. After 30 minutes of gaming, the 10 Pro peaked at 40.5 degrees Celsius on the back versus 38.7 on the 10T, so it is a couple of degrees cooler. So in my experience, the 10T is maybe 5% faster than the 10 Pro, although it comes down to what you play. In some games, it's a small improvement, in others, it doesn't really make much difference. Now, moving on, because the 10T also has a smaller battery, 4800 versus 5000 milliamp hours. And we've also lost the LTPO panel, so the refresh rate can't dynamically go as low to save battery. But the good news is that the 8 Plus Gen 1 chip is more efficient. It offsets those compromises, so battery life is near enough the same between them. And actually, in my test, the 10T had 2% left when the 10 Pro died. So a surprising minor win for the T, but the loss of wireless and reverse wireless charging is a real shame. For me, I'd rather have those features than shaving off a few minutes on a wired charge with the new 150 watt Super VOOC charger. So again, it's just another compromise. But one thing that really surprised me is this camera, because on paper, it should be a lot worse. Tell me what you think in the comments, but focusing on the main camera to start with, and in theory, the 10 Pro should be a lot better. It is 48 megapixels rather than 50, but it has a much bigger and much better sensor. But from the photos I've taken, side by side, you can see the 10T actually reduces some of the overexposed highlights, often leaving us with more detail and a more evenly exposed photo. And sometimes, where there's strong colors in a scene, the 10T seems to be able to handle it better, whereas the 10 Pro actually can become a bit oversaturated. Plus, in these selfies, despite the 10T having half the megapixels, but the colors appear to be a bit more natural, the exposure is a bit more even. Again, I'm leaning towards preferring the 10T. However, switching to the telephoto lens and it all falls down because the 10T doesn't have one. This is a real shame, and you can see just how much of a difference the 10 Pro's 3.3 times optical zoom can make. As I mentioned at the start, this has been one of the trickiest reviews I've made for a while. So does this last-minute price drop for myself and presumably anyone else reviewing this make a difference to whether I'd recommend the 10T? Well, yeah, a bloody big difference actually. It's like 170 quid less than we were told. So apologies for that. Obviously I'm adding this into the video. I don't want to mislead anyone. I think for this price, the new price, it's actually pretty good value considering again a Snapdragon 8 Plus Gen 1 and some pretty high-end specs, and it really is comparable to the 10 Pro. I was giving it a hard time because I thought it would be the same price, but as frustrating as it is for me, it is actually good news for everyone. We're getting a much more affordable, much better value OnePlus phone. The 10T is now a pretty solid proposition. But what do you think? Between the two, which would you go for? Let me know in the comments below. And if you did find this video useful, a thumbs up and a little subscribe would be very much appreciated. And I'll see you next time right here on the Tech Chat. Great.